Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. Lot in this world you should know, and loving life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, the loving light will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Wow. But before we get on to the subject, have I got some breaking news for you. Dr. Death, or Dr. Fauci as he's commonly known, has now been exposed and will be arrested. The Antichrist, Bill Gates, and many others should now follow in his footsteps to life behind bars, and China and the US owe the world trillions in reparations. I think you know what I'm talking about here. This explosive story has just been posted on Loving Life TV under the heading, Proof that the COVID-19 virus was deliberately released into the world to enrich the vaccine companies while ruining your lives. Now, all I'm going to say in addition to that is that this is a breaking story, and there is a link below this video to the Fauci emails that you can go and look at yourself. They're heavily redacted. Despite being heavily redacted, the information that has been released is enough to clearly implicate Dr. Fauci in what you've been going through for the last 18 months. Isn't that strange? The very man who's been demanding you wearing a mask is actually responsible for what's going on in the world today. Extraordinary. Okay, we often talk about food security, but what about drinking water? Tonight we learn just how precarious that situation has become in South Africa. And sorry guys, I should just add a rider to my breaking news, and that is that story about Fauci you will only find on lovinglifetv.com because it's too hot for YouTube to handle. So this is why we are moving to our new platform. Okay, now tonight we learn just how precarious the situation when it comes to drinking water has become in South Africa. Please remember to subscribe to Loving Life on YouTube, and importantly to register on lovinglifetv.com. You can always just Google Loving Life TV, one word, and it'll take you straight to our website. But make sure you register there. And as I say, that breaking story that I just told you about is on that website. All right, I'll get my guest Marietta Leferlink on now. Here we go.
Good evening, Scott.
There you are. Perfect, 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 perfect. Now, what's not so perfect is the state of drinking water in South Africa, and that's going to be the subject we will be discussing in some detail tonight. And first of all, I just want to say we often forget about the importance of clean drinking water for our community when we seem to be obsessed with food security, because drinking water is far more important when you consider how quickly you die if you don't have fresh drinking water. Now, let's get right into the subject. Marietta, can you tell me about your interest in this area before we start going through the various issues that we're facing in South Africa?
Yes, first of all, Scott, if I may just clarify, my brief was that I will be discussing tonight the impact of gold mining on both our soil, future sustainable, economic development, and also on our water. But coming back now to my background, I am a member of many of the governmental task teams, including advisory committees, strategy steering committees, as well as expert teams. So I think that our interest in the water issues are not just from a local point of view, it's also from a global point of view, because we are also associated with international organizations, including academic institutions. And I, on behalf of my organization, am also a member of many academic institutions, and we have published quite a number of academic treatises or papers.
Right, okay. Well, let's start off by, if you can tell us about the actions proposed by the National Water and Sanitation Master Plan to address the water crisis.
Yes, I think, Scott, that I have already addressed in our previous interview. I do not want to duplicate it, because my plan was for tonight to discuss with you the issues pertaining to the gold mining industry.
All right, fair enough. Okay, well, look, I have a simple question for you regarding the mining industry, and that is that mining corporations sell off companies to remove liability to repatriate mines and polluted water. And what you normally land up with is some little Mickey Mouse shell company that's got no assets, stuck with the mine after it's kind of closed down. And of course, they then just say, "Oh, we got no money, so we're not going to do anything." How do you actually stop that happening?
Yes, that is referred to as pass the parcel, and apportionment of liability is extremely complex, because especially within the gold mining industry, because the gold mining industry had been in existence for more than 130 years, and there had been more than 120 companies, mining companies or mines, that operated during the 130 years. To apportion liability, therefore, is extremely complex. In terms of our laws, that is the National Environmental Management Act and the National Water Act, the liability and the responsibility for pollution and ecological degradation is retrospective, which means that previous owners of mining companies, directors, companies, and directors both individually and collectively, can be held responsible and liable. I shall just refer perhaps to one extract from the National Environmental Management Act and the National Water Act, where it stated that every person that causes, has caused, or is likely to cause pollution must be held liable for remediation. So that obviously has a retrospective application. The term has caused would refer to the retrospectivity of liability or responsibility. However, the South African government has great difficulty in implementing the retrospective application of the polluter pays principle for the very reason that the South African government has in fact authorized many of the dewatering of mining compartments, and also authorized mining and by extension also the pollution caused by mining. So the accountability is therefore not just on mining companies, that is historic mining companies, the last men standing, but also on the state itself, because as we may know, the state has benefited handsomely from the extraction of minerals, and especially in the gold mining industry. The gold mining industry, especially during the apartheid years, has yielded more than 1/3 of the gold ever produced on the planet, and the Witwatersrand goldfields, that is in Gauteng, held the world's largest gold reserves. But unfortunately, that also resulted in a significant environmental degradation and impacts, and I can perhaps just refer to some of these.
Yeah, go
These
ahead.
are, yes, that is the interconnection of mining compartments prior to gold mining. These compartments were impervious. In other words, there was no fissures or faults, but with regards to mining, it now resulted in fissures, faults, and fractures, which allows for the migration of polluted water in these underground mining compartments. There is also the matter of acid mine drainage or acid rock drainage, large salt loads, decanting of flooded mines, that is where a mining compartment floods with acid mine water and then spills over or daylights into the environment with devastating consequences. It has also resulted in physical instability, such as sinkhole formations. Just to give you an example, there are more than 1,000 sinkholes that had been introduced because of the mining activities within the Witwatersrand goldfields. There is also the matter of dust pollution, land use conflicts with growing urban centres, and radioactivity and uranium, because our gold ore co-occurs with uranium, which, as you know, will remain radioactive not just for biological ages, but for geological ages. So, Scott, this is actually what I prepared for to discuss tonight, because this is my organization's focus point, namely the impact of mining on the environment and also on communities.
That's fine. I actually had a focus on other areas where water's getting polluted, but that's fine. Look, I've got a good understanding of how polluted the water is as a result of mining. And one of the areas that I find extraordinary is that they're talking about building mines, which with the discharge will go into the Zambezi River, up in the northern part of Limpopo. And you've obviously heard about those mines that they're considering developing. What would the impact of that be on that extremely important river, especially when it comes to wildlife?
Yes, but we have to look at the historic evidence of mining on water, gold and coal mining, and within the upper Limpopo area, there is, of course, a significant a number of applications for both prospecting and mining, including not just platinum mining, but also coal mining. Now, both gold and coal mines are classified as category A mines in terms of the draft mine water management policy. The reason why they are classified as category A mines is because they are acid producing. Coal and gold mines contain iron pyrite, and because these tailing storage facilities, the waste, cannot be maintained in a reducing or oxygen-free environment, when it rains, the rainwater with the oxygen and the iron pyrite produces acid mine drainage. Now, this acid mine drainage will continue for many years, even after mine closure. I just want to come back to acid mine drainage. Acid mine drainage contains a wide spectrum of metals, including in the gold fields, uranium. And the acid mine drainage, the chronic exposure to acid mine drainage will result in impairment of cognitive function, skin lesions. It can result in cancer. It can also affect the neural development of the fetus, which may then result in mental retardation. Besides that, the metals in acid mine drainage also precipitate or drop out in the sediment or in the soil. So it has a very significant impact, not just on water resources, but also on your soil. Besides that, acid mine drainage also contains significantly elevated levels of salt, or we refer to it as sulfate. Just to give an example, in the Witwatersrand goldfields, acid mine drainage contains sulfate levels of almost 5,000 milligrams per liter, and the regulatory limit is 600 milligrams per liter.
Wow.
So the cost of combating this salinity, both in the water as well as in the soil, is currently externalized to the domestic sector or to the agricultural sector, and not to the mining sector as may have been anticipated.
Well, look, I have to tell you, when I was a young man, when I was at boarding school, this is back in the early 1970s, and we were, one of my subjects was geography. And this subject was raised back then about the pollution that the mines caused to the water systems. That was 50 years ago. And here we are still
Yes.
talking about it. I mean, isn't it extraordinary that they just haven't got their act right yet?
Scott, I fully agree with you. I have a paper, it's a paper also by a person his surname is also Scott. I referred to that in my previous discussion with you. It was a report done by the Water Research Commission. And in that report, it mentioned that, for example, acid mine drainage or mine water pollution was a recognized phenomenon since 1903, so many years ago. And notwithstanding the fact that it was already a recognized phenomenon, there had been no management measures put in place. Currently, there has been management measures put in place to deal with acid mine water, but the treatment is referred to as the short-term solution, which is merely a neutralization of the acid mine water. In other words, it adjusts the pH, and with the adjustment of the pH, then the metals that are soluble then become solid. So it merely changes the metals from being soluble into solid. It is not the permanent solution, because the salt still remains very high, which means the water is still unfit for any usage. That is the current treatment. The long-term treatment, which would involve the desalination, is unfortunately costly. And at the moment, the Department of Water and Sanitation has financial constraints, and they are now attempting to do a recalibration of the salinity model for one of the most important river systems in South Africa, that is the integrated Vaal River system, in order to see how they can address the increase in salinity, because as we know, our water systems are currently under significant threat, and the high salinity will cause additional water security risks.
And of course, the higher up the chain, if I can call it that, the actual catchment area miners, the more impact it has, because it goes further down the river. Now I understand that a lot of the rivers in South Africa, including the Vaal, now have a lot of these heavy metals and stuff that just go to the bottom and just sit there and just pollute the water. Is that correct? And that's from the mines, isn't it?
Perhaps I can mention to you, there have been quite a number of studies done on the Wonderfontein Spruit, The English word for the Wonderfonteinspruit is the miraculous fountain stream. Prior to mining, this stream, which flows into the Var River system, was considered to be a pristine water source. In fact, it was in a documentary classified as one of the seven wonders of South Africa. As a result of the gold mining industry, the river now contains elevated levels of cadmium, cobalt, copper, zinc, arsenic, and uranium, with the main contaminants being cadmium and uranium. These metals are now absorbed in the sediment of the Wonderfonteinspruit, but under plausible conditions such as acid mine water, acid rain, the drying out of the sediment and a sudden influx of water, or cattle disturbing the sediment. These metals can again be remobilized and can be solubilized, in other words, dissolved into the water. And what is of significant concern is that the Wonderfonteinspruit also flows, besides flowing further down to the Var River system, it also flows into the Boskop Dam, which is the main drinking reservoir for 400 of Potchefstroom. So that is of significant concern. I also wish to refer to a study that was done by a master's student at Potchefstroom's Northwest University. His name was David Hamman, in which he looked at cattle and the impact of the water on the cattle, and also the cattle that graze next to the Wonderfonteinspruit. And it was found that the cattle's hair, the spleen, the kidneys, the liver, the tissue contains elevated levels of metals. In fact, the kidneys contained uranium levels 4,350 times higher than the control group. In other words, the cattle that drank and grazed adjacent to the Wonderfonteinspruit had elevated levels of metals, especially uranium. So I just want to emphasize that, of course, with metals, it bioaccumulates. It bioaccumulates not only in crops, but it also bioaccumulates in cattle, for example. And there was another study done, which I think is quite an amusing title for the study. The study was done by Professor Henk Bellman, and the study was titled "The Heron That Laid the Golden Egg." And the reason why the study was titled "The Heron That Laid the Golden Egg" was that it was found that all the riverine birds, such as the heron, the egret, and so the ibis, all that feed from these river systems downstream of the gold mining industry, that their eggs contained elevated levels of metals, including gold. And that is why the title is entitled the Heron That Laid the Golden Egg. But we must just, of course, remember that herons and humans share similar food, and humans are therefore also exposed to the same contamination.
Now, cattle, they can do their research on and see they've got heavy metals and uranium and all this sort of stuff in them. A couple of questions related to that. First off, what is the impact on people who eat the meat from those cattle that have elevated levels of heavy metals and uranium and stuff like that? Is that going to start forming in their bodies as well?
Scott, this is our great concern. The fact that there has been no epidemiological studies conducted in order to determine the causal link between the metal contamination in the waste of mining and then the impacts on the communities. There had been an attempt made by the World Health Organization, by the International Association of IARC. I can't recall now the acronym is IARC, International Association of Research on Cancer, and my organization, the Federation for a Sustainable Environment, was contracted, and together with Professor Frank Winder at the time of the Northwest University. We then collected 1,600 samples of human hair. The hair, like teeth and like nails and bones, accumulate, for example, uranium. And there was this study done in order to assess whether there is elevated levels of uranium in the hair of communities that live in close proximity or adjacent to mining waste, that is within the gold mining areas of Johannesburg. However, the study was non-conclusive, but the study then recommended, or the authors recommended, that there ought to be more research conducted. Regrettably, there is no funds available for such a epidemiological study. So that is of serious concern. I also just want to mention to you that it was found that many of the construction material contains tailings from gold mining tailing storage facilities. So the construction material also contain uranium, and as we all know, one of the decay products of uranium is radon. So there is also significant concern regarding the inhalation of radon if, for example, construction material contains uraniferous tailings. It was also found that large areas in the central business district of Johannesburg contains elevated levels of radioactivity as a result of the use of tailings for construction material. Besides that, there are more than 400,000 people that are living on 380 radioactive mine residue areas. Wow. Obviously, that also will have an impact on their health, especially on the health of those that are characterized by widespread poverty, chronic and acute malnutrition, as well as substance abuse and high levels of HIV and AIDS.
Well, you know, all I can say is I think the lockdown has been directed in the wrong place. They should be locking down these mines and stopping, because this is impacting everybody, isn't it? I mean, it's not just the we were just talking about the water, but it's not just the water. It's the air. It's what you eat. Everything is impacted by what these mines are doing.
Yes, but Scott, we must remember there had been more than 120 mines that had operated over 130 years. We are now left with last men standing, and at least there are some more responsible mining companies now that are reclaiming, in other words, they are reprocessing the existing tailing storage facilities. There are more than 270 of these mine dumps or tailing storage facilities. In the process of reclamation, they then reclaim the residual gold, they remove the entire dump, and then they deposit the residue on better engineered tailing storage facilities. We refer to them as super dumps or regional tailing storage facilities. And then these footprints are being rehabilitated to make it safe. Because what has happened is that many mining communities or many communities have encroached upon the areas where mines exist. Often informal settlements are developed adjacent to these tailing storage facilities, which of course expose these communities not just to the inhalation and ingestion of radioactive dust and the deposition of the radioactive dust on their crops, but also to the physical dangers or risk associated with mining operations.
Wow. Now, if we look around South Africa, in your view, what are the safest places to live to get away from an environment where it's been compromised by all these heavy metals, uranium, particles of gold, and all this sort of stuff that are flowing through the rivers, that are in the ground, in the groundwater? Everything has been basically contaminated. What are the safest parts of South Africa which have been the least contaminated?
All I want to mention is that the Witwatersrand goldfields obviously is high risk areas because of the mining activities. Wherever mining is taking place, there are risks associated with that. In fact, if I may just refer to a quotation from the European Environmental Bureau, they found that mining waste is in fact the second greatest environmental risk to the environment besides climate change. And the reason for that is because of the profound, often irreversible impacts of mining on ecosystems. So, and gold mining, just to mention statistics, gold mining contributes 47% to all mining waste in South Africa. So obviously, where there is mining activities, there are risks associated with that, but one has to balance the socio-economic benefits also with the environmental sustainability. And I think in South Africa, there is a dependency on mining, even a psychological dependency on mining. It is being well classified as the backbone of South Africa, the lifeblood, the DNA of South Africa. So one has then to determine whether the ecological degradation is more important or should be addressed in a more, profound manner than, for example, the socio-economic development. That is the trade-off that must be determined. Often the trade-off is in favor of socio-economic development, but wherever there is mining, there are risks. Of course, certain mines do not have as high risks. I've mentioned in my introduction that coal and gold mines are classified as category A mines because they are acid producing, and the acid mine drainage will continue for many, many years after mine closure. Other mining companies such as platinum mines, diamond mines, sand mines, these type of mines do not have the same impact, and they are classified as category B or category C mines.
Right. Wow. Now, I find it fascinating because I read in an article just last week that South Africa in the first quarter of this year made 140 billion rand profit in its exports just because of commodities, and I think the big one was platinum. So clearly there's still a huge amount of mining going on in South Africa, which we don't hear about. But apparently last year at the same period, South Africa had a loss of something like 43 billion rand over that period. So the mining industry is still going full tilt. And what you're saying to us is that every time, let's say, a ton of platinum is mined, the impact to the actual environment by mining that platinum is very considerable. Now, if you look at the history of South Africa and the mining, can we actually save South Africa's water systems? Because they're still mining. As I said, they've made a huge profit in the last 3 months in South Africa because of commodities. And that comes because they're mining. So how can you save South Africa's water systems if this is still taking place?
Yes. First of all, I just want to mention, Scott, that acid mine drainage, as I've mentioned, is the most costly socio-economic and environmental challenge, and that is associated with coal and gold mining. Mm-hmm. Now, going back to the gold mining, in the 1960s, the South African government, that was the apartheid government, authorized the dewatering of the mining compartments. The reason why it authorized or permitted the dewatering of the underground mining compartments is in order to make safe mining. As a result, the fountains in the area dried up, and the water was merely pumped as a nuisance, and it flowed just into the rivers and then downstream, of course, obviously to the oceans. But as the mining industry went into decline, the gold mining industry is in decline. So the pre-mining flow patterns of volumes of water are currently being restored, which means there is ingress through open shafts or ingress through fractures or fissures or faults, and also groundwater recharge. But as this water now recharges the underground voids or basins, the mining voids or basins, it then combines with the iron pyrite within the disturbed rock. The iron pyrite causes the acidification of the mine water, of the water, and this acid in the water then leaches the other metals such as cadmium, cobalt, copper, zinc, arsenic, which is a metalloid, and uranium. And this water then containing elevated levels of metals in toxic concentrations, then floods a mining basin. And when that mining basin is flooded, it then spills out or into river systems or into dams or into wetlands. And this often has devastating consequences. This happened in 2002 within the West Rand of Gauteng. What happened as a result of this acid mine water decanting or flowing out, we also refer to it as daylighting. It resulted in one of the rivulets or the streams, it's called the Tweeloopie-Spruit, which flows into the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site, to become a Class 5 river system, which means a highly acute toxic river system. It also resulted in some of the receptor dams, such as the Robinson Lake, to become a declared radioactive dam. So this is the impact of acid mine drainage. And so after 10 years of whistleblowing and activism, the South African government then declared acid mine drainage as an emergency, and then established an interministerial task team to address the acid mine water. So in 2012, a treatment plant had been refurbished within the West Rand to address the acid mine water. And then in 2014 and 2016, two additional acid mine drainage treatment plants were established within the central and the eastern basins of Gauteng. And these two treatment plants, in addition to the Western Basin AMD treatment plant, is currently treating 180 million litres of acid mine drainage per day. As I've mentioned before, this water is still unfit for any use, but at least it is no longer acidic, and it also reduces to some extent the sulfate levels, and it also then results in a metal sludge. The metals precipitate, and this is the current treatment of acid mine drainage. However, it's costly, and the long-term treatment of acid mine drainage, which would involve the desalination of acid mine drainage, will be extremely costly. The cost of the treatment of acid mine drainage is currently paid by the taxpayer, and in the Western Basin, a third of the cost is being paid by the mining company Sibanye-Stillwater. So in South Africa, which is a water-scarce country, acid mine drainage is a significant threat, because in order to make the water fit for use, it has to be diluted, and South Africa does not have sufficient water to dilute the high salinity of acid mine drainage. Just to give you an example, if, for example, you pump 150 million litres of acid mine water and neutralize the water, then you would need about 60 million litres of water to dilute that water to make it fit for use. So it has a significant impact on the Vaal River system, and as we all know, the Vaal River system augments quite a number of other river systems.
Well, the Vaal River system is like the main drinking water for the whole of Gauteng, isn't it?
Correct.
And you're saying to me it's contaminated. So everybody who's drinking water is drinking contaminated water.
No, it's not contaminated, because at the moment they dilute the high salinity, and in future it will be diluted with releases from the Vaal Dam, and the Vaal Dam is receiving its water from the Lesotho Highlands Phase 2. There is also, in terms of the reconciliation strategy of the Bar River system, proposals now to also augment the phase one of the Katsi Dam with the Polihali Dam. That is phase two of the Lesotho Highlands augmentation scheme, and also the Tugela Fall. But all I just want to mention is that at the moment there was not releases required, but it can be foreseen that in future there will be releases required. And of course, it is totally unsustainable to dilute your pollution with releases from very expensive water from the Lesotho Highlands.
Yeah, well, look, I just want to go back to something you were talking about a short while ago. And that is, you mentioned that there's been no epidemiology done on how much heavy metals and uranium and other unwanted stuff are in the bodies of people who live in Gauteng. You would think that that is a really important issue. And yet this obsession that they've had in the last 18 months over the coronavirus and the epidemiology and all these tests, the billions of dollars that they spent on this COVID-19 thing, when here at home in South Africa, in Gauteng, you've got a huge health risk that no one's even looking at. Isn't this a concern to you?
It's a major concern, and the South African Human Rights Commission has also raised this issue in their report pursuant to its national hearing on the underlying socio-economic challenges of mining-affected communities in South Africa. In that report, it directed the National Nuclear Regulator, and I here just want to interpose. The National Nuclear Regulator is the organ of state that has been appointed in terms of the National Nuclear Regulators Act of 1999 to protect the public property and the environment against nuclear damage. Incidentally, tailing storage facilities, that is the gold tailing storage facilities, are classified as nuclear installations because of the uraniferous waste. These tailing storage facilities contain 600,000 tons of uranium.
Wow.
So the National Nuclear Regulator was directed to make safe these areas, but the National Nuclear Regulator interprets its mandate very narrowly. It does not regulate any radioactive waste that is outside of mining properties. These are licensed sites. The Department of Environmental Affairs also does not regulate the waste, nuclear waste outside of mining properties, because they only regulate non-radioactive waste. The problem is therefore that most of these areas that can contain radioactive waste is unregulated. However, because of activism over many years, especially by my organization, the National Nuclear Regulator has now established a special unit within the regulator in order to deal with radioactive mine residue areas. They've also developed policies that still must be finalized, and also a framework. The problem here is that there is no money available to implement it. So this is of major concern. It would appear that it's not only the Department of Water and Sanitation that has a significant shortfall of 333 billion rand for the next 10 years, but the National Nuclear Regulator too has no funds available to address the 380 mine residue areas which are radioactive, and to remediate these radioactive residue areas. And as I've mentioned, these radioactive residue areas are inhabited by persons, more than 400,000 people.
Wow. Well, look, I remember when I flew into, I'm going to be terribly politically incorrect here, but I don't care. When I flew into Jan Smuts Airport in 2006, flying in, and all the tailing dumps, you could see, all, they were everywhere, all over. And you think this is actually Johannesburg, which has got a huge population, you've got all these tailing dumps which they haven't been cleaned up, and you now say that the actual the people who actually did the mining, I'm talking about the Oppenheimers, the super wealthy families, are now not putting their hands in their pockets to help clean up the mess. And they're expecting the taxpayer now to pick up. This is bullshit. This is, I mean, seriously, these guys, Harry Oppenheimer, not Harry Oppenheimer, Nicky Oppenheimer, his fortune is estimated at over 100 billion rand, and that's probably conservative. You know, they should just empty his bank accounts, put it into a fund that actually is going to sort this out, and do it, because he is instrumental in the issues that we're facing in South Africa today.
The law is very clear, Scott, that that there is a retrospective liability. In other words, even before the enabling legislation, remember our uh, National Environmental Management Act was promulgated in 1998. Our National Water Act was published in 1998. Our Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act was published in 2000. In terms of legal precedents that have been established in cases, in court cases, it has been confirmed that any person, even before the enabling legislation, that caused pollution must be held liable and
Well, why aren't
accountable.
they be then? Why aren't they?
That is the matter that must be the National Prosecuting Authority. I can tell you my organization had significant issues, challenges with regards to even just enforcing non-compliance with current mining companies. We are currently in litigation. I may have referred to it previously in the case of Mintails, an Australian mining company.
Yeah.
And case, they were allowed by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. They are the competent authority to regulate mining activities and to authorize mining activities. And the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy had allowed Mintails to operate without an approved environmental management plan, without mining rights, and without sufficient rehabilitation funds. In fact, they now have a shortfall of 460 million rand, and they have left clusters of open pits, 30 to 40 meters deep, partially reclaimed tailing storage facilities where they only reclaimed the profitable part of the tailing storage facility, unrehabilitated footprints, toxic and radioactive dams. And to date now, there had been no action taken against Mintails and its directors. The law is very clear in terms of Section 34 of the National Environmental Management Act. Directors, both personally and collectively, as well as companies, operators, managers, can be held liable and responsible for the ecological damage and pollution. So all I want to say, we have excellent legislation in our country, an excellent constitution, but our enforcement is extremely weak. And it seems that there is great hesitancy on the part of the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy and other organs of state to enforce non-compliance and to prosecute polluters.
Right. Well, I guess what we're saying in summary is that let's take a gold mine. Okay, they produce a gold ingot which weighs about 300 kilos, and you know that ingot, which is probably on a very big mine a day's work. Um, the actual pollution created by that one ingot, when you consider the acid water, the heavy metals, and everything else that's going into the groundwater as a result of all the earth that's been disturbed, and they've had to go through the process. We haven't even touched on cyanide yet, but that gold is shipped over to some bank in Wall Street or under the City of London, and the people back in South Africa are left with the long-term impacts of that piece of gold that's now sitting in another country's bank vault. And
Yes.
the long-term impacts are then left with these people, and there's no reparation. That is crazy.
Yes. Scott, I hope you can see this in the Mail and Guardian. This is an article that was just published on Friday in the Mail and Guardian. What you've just stated now, that is also being reported by mining affected communities. They are carrying the impacts, they are carrying the cost. We refer to this as the externalization of cost model. Mining in South Africa, not just gold mining, all mining, has been based on the externalization of cost model. That basically means that when a mining company argues its sustainability, it would put on its balance sheet its development costs. It would put on its balance sheet its operational costs and its profits. What is not put on the balance sheet is when the mine closes, the cost following the closure of the mine. And those costs often only become manifest after a mine is closed. So there is attempts now being made by the Department of Environmental Affairs. It's now called the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. There are now efforts made by this department to also look at latent and residual impacts, and calling on all mining companies to make provision not just for current impacts but also for unforeseen or foreseen latent and residual impacts, including the pumping and treatment of extraneous or polluted water such as acid mine water. So that is the proposal. That is already in the 2015 financial regulations. It's also in the 2019 proposed, it's still a draft regulations, that mining companies, if they go into liquidation or business rescue, that the business rescue practitioner and the liquidation must also make provision for the rehabilitation. But unfortunately, this has not been implemented yet. We are not aware of any mining company where these regulations have been implemented. The problem also is we spoke in the introduction on pass the parcel, or where well-resourced mining companies often sell to less resourced mining companies.
Yeah.
These companies, when they go into liquidation, the dilemma here is the problem is that when a company goes into liquidation, it ceases to exist as a legal entity. And that legal entity is usually the holder of a mining right, and that holder of a mining right often is also connected with a person. So when a mining company goes into liquidation, is liquidated, it no longer is a legal entity, and therefore there can be no enforcement against or prosecution against such a company. So this also is a major problem. And when Mintails went into liquidation, the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee at the time, that was in 2018, did an oversight visit of the Mintails operation, and they in fact directed the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy to address this matter, that when a company goes into business rescue or into liquidation, there must be some mechanism to enforce compliance and to prosecute. However, at this time, I'm unaware that these directives or recommendations of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee had been implemented. So all I want to say, Scott, we are continuing with our activism. We have not fallen into despair, but I can just tell you that it is a journey, and this journey is arduous, and it takes tremendous perseverance and endurance in order to, to make small differences.
Well, I think that what is very disturbing is if you look at, and I'm going to go back to Nicky Oppenheimer. He was one of the major contributors, financial contributors to Ramaphosa's CR17 campaign when he was wanting to become president. And that's common knowledge. Now, clearly, Oppenheimer is also one of the big funders of the ANC government. Now, as long as they are taking money from him, they are beholden to him. and they're not going to start taking the sort of action that you're suggesting, because they're then going to kill their golden goose. So how do we actually get to people like Oppenheimer, who clearly is a beneficiary of everything that's taken place in South Africa when it comes to the gold mines and the Witwatersrand, De Beers, etc., etc., etc. And he is apparently able to just keep all the ill-gotten gains he's made out of all this mining without any comeback on the damage that he has caused personally because of his funding of these mining operations. How do we resolve this?
You know, Scott, I can't comment on the Oppenheimers because, unfortunately, as I've mentioned also in our previous interview, our focus is not on the politics. All I can state that we are campaigning, and our activism is focused not just on addressing the current pollution, but also the historic pollution, because I also do feel that it is unfair, it's inequitable, it's immoral, it's unjust to only hold current mining companies responsible for historic. So I think we are, in this case, our sentiments are not at variance, and I do not think that the Constitution as well as our environmental laws are also in conflict. I think we are all agreed that the historic or the retrospective application of the polluter pays principle must also be enforced. However, it has not happened. For what reason? It may be, as you've mentioned, that there are political reasons for that I cannot comment on. You did mention previously that for one gold bar, you have a significant amount of mining waste. If I may just mention to you, previously I mentioned about the 43,000 tons of gold that had been extracted. Sorry,
That's okay.
my cat. The 43,000 tons of gold that had been extracted during the 130 years of gold mining. We had differences in the amount of tons that had been extracted, and I think perhaps the difference, I don't know if that may be the reason, was my statistics are based on a 2008 academic paper, so there may have been more perhaps gold extracted since 2008.
But I think the figure that I had read was something over 100,000 tons of gold. That's more than double that figure. So you're saying that between 2008 and 2021, they've mined more gold in South Africa than they have over the preceding over 100 years. That doesn't make sense.
I don't know. Scott, I can only comment on what the academic paper has.
I hear what you're saying, yeah.
But just to make a comparison between gold and the waste it created, of 2,500 tons of gold, it created 6 billion tons of waste. So that puts it in perspective. You mentioned when you flew over Johannesburg, you saw the storage facilities. Now, I visit these tailing storage facilities almost on a daily basis. I recently also witnessed, it was in fact on Thursday, on Environmental Day celebration, that I witnessed the birth, the genesis of a super dumper tailing storage facilities. It's enormous. It's really enormous. I've also witnessed from time to time the pouring of a gold bar. And when you see the small gold bar and you see the amount of rocks and that has gone into the formation of this gold bar, it really is quite surprising. So the waste that has been created by gold, although it has been justified, as you know, because it has contributed handsomely to South Africa's economy, the GDP. It's also established Johannesburg. It's also created jobs for many mine workers, and in my association and engagement with mining affected communities, I've come to the realization that for them of much greater importance than the environment and the ecology is in fact jobs. Most of them are very poor, and for them to have a job is more important to have a safe environment.
Well, I just think it's tragic because we were talking about the water table earlier and how that's been contaminated. Um, has the water table, there must be like barriers between different water tables in South Africa. For example, the Free State, where a lot of water is pumped up from the water table underneath. Has that been contaminated? Because that's the food bowl of South Africa.
Yes, look, at the moment, our groundwater, because there's an interconnection between your surface and
Yeah,
water, and mentioned in our previous interview, most of our main river systems are now polluted, some of them beyond repair. Of our wetlands, 50% has been lost, and of the remaining wetlands, 33% are now in a poor condition. So obviously, the raw sewage discharges, you may recall I mentioned 56%
yeah,
of our water treatment works are dysfunctional or in a poor condition. So the sewage, together also with your mine water pollution, all of that contributes not just to your surface water pollution, but it also impacts upon your groundwater. So more and more money will have to be spent on the treatment of the water to make it safe for domestic use and also for drinking purposes. I also might just mention to you the rivers are also used, for recreational purposes. They are used for spiritual rituals such as baptisms, and they also are used for the watering of cattle. Cattle drink from the water from the river. So all of that has an impact. I don't want to give a negative perspective to your listeners, but I just want to mention that our water situation is in a crisis situation. It's extremely critical that we address our the gaps in information, the gaps in data, the skills shortages, the lack of political will, the dysfunctional sewage systems, the bankrupt municipalities, the fact that there is non-revenue water. In other words, many people do not pay for their water. There is water theft. All of these issues, there are major, major concerns.
right. Now, look, I remember day zero in Cape Town, which happened a year or two ago, where they just hadn't had rain and their dam was dry. We are, or South Africa is so dependent on rain. What happens if you have a really long dry spell like they've had in the Free State, where they've had droughts for about 6 or 7 years? What happens if that occurs over an area like Gauteng, which with all the rivers that feed the Vaal, and there's no water, like the Vaal goes down to a trickle.
Yes, of course.
And then it's all contaminated on top of that.
Yeah, it's not just a matter that there will not be drinking water or water for gardens or water for golf estates or golf courses. The problem here is if you do not have water, you cannot have economic growth. Water is, besides essential for life, I mean, it's one of the basic human rights in terms of Section 27 of our Bill of Rights of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. The right to water of sufficient quality and quantity is a basic human right. I also just want to mention to you that there are two the most important water users in terms of our National Water Act. The first is, of course, for human use, and the second is the reserve. The reserve is, in other words, the water that there is sufficient water in the river systems to sustain your aquatic biota and ecosystem goods. So, and at the moment, if we maintain the reserve, then there will be no water for people in many of these areas. You asked me, Scott, in the introduction when I said my focus tonight was to talk on the gold mining industry, but also asked me about some of the actions in the National Water and Sanitation Master Plan. I have it now in front of me. It's this one.
Yeah, right.
This is the recent Water and Sanitation Master Plan. The action here is, for example, to develop, update, and maintain a reconciliation planning studies to achieve optimal water mix, which would include desalination of seawater and also of mine water, acid and incorporate the climate change into studies. This has to be done by 2030, but by 2020, 2019, 2020, the following had to be done: the revitalization of the green, blue, and no drop programs. That is for us to know what is the state of our drinking water and the state of our wastewater. That had to be done annually.
Was that done?
No, since 2014, we've had no programs published. So we are totally unaware of what we drink, the municipality, what the municipalities provide to the public, and also the wastewater.
No, I was going to ask you that question. I was going to say, you know, if I'm living in Gauteng today and I've got a home and I've got tap water, what should I be drinking? Should I be buying bottled water from overseas to drink and just using the tap water for a bath or a shower? What's your advice to people listening to this?
Now, at the moment, well, in Gauteng, our water is being managed by Rand Water, and as far as I know, because I sit on many of these forum meetings where the water quality result of Rand Water are being provided to us, and the water is still fit for use. In other words, for drinking purposes. However, no person can drink water from a river. That would be most not suitable at all. So river water is not suitable. Sometimes borehole water being contaminated also is not suitable. But our drinking water from our taps at the moment is safe for use.
But we're talking about Gauteng. How about places like Ugu on the KwaZulu South Coast, or Port Elizabeth or East London? I'm sorry, I'm not going to use the new names because people don't know what I'm talking about then. I mean, how about big municipalities like PE and East London? Is their tap water safe to drink?
Yes, I cannot comment on that, Scott, because what I can comment on is where I sit at forums where we have requested that Rand Water or Magalies Water would supply us with their water quality results. And in these cases, I can confirm that the water is fit for use. Again, I just want to mention that borehole water has to be tested from time to time, because obviously there is an interaction between pollutants on surface and also your groundwater. And then I am also aware that there are many other municipalities where the water is not fit for use. I think there had been news media coverage of that. Coming back also again to the actions proposed by the National Water and Sanitation Master Plan. In 2020, the South African Police Service, the National Prosecuting Authority, and all the other organs of state had to identify and prosecute major non-compliant abstractors, water thieves across the country. That has not happened.
Well, I'm not surprised when it comes to the South African Police Service. Anyway, please continue.
By 2020, there had to be an identification and prosecution of big polluters across the country, including municipalities, with a national communication campaign to accompany this action. That also had not happened. Then there was, let me just, there's many actions, but unfortunately, none of these actions have been implemented. But I'm now focusing on perhaps some of the more important actions. Also, by 2021 and 2020, to declare strategic water source areas and critical groundwater recharge areas and aquatic ecosystems recognized as threatened or sensitive as protected areas, and to restore these sensitive areas. Now, that has not happened. In fact, the opposite is happening at the moment.
I'm not surprised.
In fact, coal mining is now being authorized in strategic water resource areas.
Oh.
So instead of protecting our strategic water resource areas, we now have certain protected areas being undeclared and coal mining being authorized in these protected areas or strategic water resource areas. Then it was also recommended that by 2020, financially sustainable catchment management agencies must be established across the country, and staff and budget must be transferred. This has not happened. Of the 9 catchment management agencies, only 2 had been established, and now these others had been reduced. In fact, now even the Vaal Catchment Management Agency, it is now proposed to align it with the Orange Catchment Management Agency. These catchment management agencies had been proposed in 1998 in the National Water Act. Only 2 had been established, and these catchment management agencies are essential in order for the public to be part in the decision making on water, and also for communities to be watchdogs, to act as watchdogs in the management of the water. So you can understand how important this is, the establishment of management agency. But because there is a funding backlog, these catchment management agencies have been deferred for many, many years. There's also the development and implementation program for recruiting experienced and technical and managerial staff in South Africa. And well, there's many actions. If I hold it up like that, you will see there's many actions in this National Water and Sanitation Master Plan, but regrettably, none of that has been implemented.
So who's the minister in charge of water?
Lindiwe Sisulu.
Oh,
She
God.
has
Why am I surprised? Okay, sorry. Please carry on.
Over from Nombula Mokonyane.
Yeah.
And as we all know, there are, allegations of corruption, very strong allegations of corruption. I was invited by Minister Sisulu to her budget speech when she became the minister, and she committed that the officials in the Department of Water and Sanitation will work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and but regrettably, we've not seen much improvement.
Well, you won't. And look, she used to be the Minister for Social Affairs, wasn't she? Before this, I mean, it's the it's musical chairs. They go from one position to another when they screw up in the old one. It's just ridiculous. I tongue in cheek said the other day that Ramaphosa was talking about a reshuffle in his cabinet. And I suggested that probably the reshuffle would be Bekesele being made the health minister and Dr. Zweli Mkhize becoming the police minister. I mean, because that's how it works in South Africa. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Now, okay, I'm going to start wrapping up this live stream in a short while, Marriott. But is there something that you would like to discuss or talk about that I've omitted in this live stream today?
I have prepared the discussion, but it became a very impromptu discussion.
Yeah.
So I did not refer really to what I wanted to discuss, but I think I covered all of that basically.
In a more informal way.
Yeah, I think perhaps for me the most important is I do recognize the importance of the extractive industry, mining, but I think of great concern is that uh, any mineral, the extraction of any metal or mineral, it is unsustainable because a metal is finite. In other words, in time the metal will be depleted or the minerals will be depleted. So it is essential that we also look towards future sustainable land use options. And what is also very important, we must remember in terms of Section 24 of our Constitution, we also have to look after the rights of future generations. They too have a right to minerals and metals. If we exploit all our metals and all our minerals, then there will be nothing left for future generations.
It'll just be a show.
Correct. So we have to be very circumspect in how we extract our metals. It has to be done orderly. I think in this time now where South Africa is faced with significant allegations of corruption and poverty, that there is now an emphasis to exploit all our metals, all our resources. But we must remember that is contrary to Section 24 of our Constitution. The future generations also must have the right, not just to a safe and healthy environment, but also to benefit from our resources and metals. And then also when a mining company commences mining, from the commencement of its mining, it must already prepare its future land use options and a closure plan, so that when it closes, that the communities have sustainable livelihood opportunities and that there is also a sustainable development after the closure of a mine. I think that is extremely important.
Yeah. Now, just one thing we haven't touched on is the use of cyanide in the gold mining process. I know a lot of that went into the tailing dams, and there were leaks of cyanide into rivers and stuff like that. What's the current situation in South Africa when it comes to this lethal poison?
Yeah, many of the bigger mining companies, they have a cyanide code to which they comply with. Often cyanide in time, through sunlight, it is no longer a risk, although they are long-living cyanide metal complexes. However, cyanide we do not find in the water quality results of mining companies. They are required to publish their water quality results, and we are supplied with these water quality results. There is often not a risk with cyanide. What we often find, however, there is high mercury in the water, and that mercury is as a result of artisanal mining, that is referred to as illegal mining or unlawful mining or artisanal mining, because these artisanal miners, and there are thousands of them.
This is Zamazamas.
They prefer not to be called by as Zamazamas, but they often use mercury. In fact, on Friday, I visited a massive artisanal mining activity in Riverlea, where the old George Harrison Park, which was a park that was established in Langlaagte, where the first gold was discovered, that park is now non-existent, but there is a massive shaft in which the miners now, artisanal miners now, mine the residual gold, and they use mercury. And the mercury, of course, also then seeps into our groundwater, in our surface water, and that has a significant impact. Besides that, we've also found that they are often high manganese. Manganese is also associated with gold mining. We also find, of course, that there is high sulfate, high iron. So these contaminants perhaps are more significant than cyanide.
Yeah, and apparently mercury causes Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah,
In
and
people.
impairment of cognitive functions.
Yeah, yeah, it's a deadly disease, and yet they used to put it in our teeth. Can you believe that? It's crazy. Now, Lance Sheriff said, "Thank you, Scott, and the Loving Life team. Mariette Leferink is a very prominent international environmentalist and spokesperson, etc. I am humbled knowing how important she is. Just open Google and Google her, and you will see how important Mariette is." Now, you've kind of been hiding your sort of important role underneath the kitchen table, if I can use that sort of thing, because you're a very, very important person in the background, aren't you, when it comes to the water issue in South Africa? It's a subject you know a heck of a lot about.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, it's been my it's been a passion of mine. Sometimes I feel well discouraged, but it's amazing when you get involved that you somehow I don't know feel empowered by your own enthusiasm. And as I've mentioned, there's no silver bullet, but I have seen successes. And those successes, I must tell you, it's an encouragement to me to continue. But there's also a lot of what is encouragement we gain from other activists. We like to refer to ourselves as human rights defenders and not just activists. There are a lot of victimization, but on the other hand, too, we have found a lot of encouragement, and I think your listener that has written such unmerited praise is a great encouragement to me. I will go to sleep tonight thinking very highly of myself.
Now, just talking about the government, let's say hypothetically the president is listening to this live stream right now, and you had the opportunity to give him a message about the water crisis in South Africa. What would you say to Ramaphosa?
Well, I would just say that if he is intent to make our country great, to have economic development, to increase the livelihood opportunities of poor communities, then water is of utmost importance, because there can be absolutely no social and economic development if we do not have a water source that is both sufficient in quality and quantity.
Right. Okay. Mariette, I want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know it's been a very informal discussion, but I think we covered most of the key issues. I just want to say to people watching, thank you for joining us tonight. To the moderators, thank you for looking after the side chat. I noticed one guy had his messages deleted. I'm not sure what he was on about, but anyway. Please, guys, take care, be safe, and please share this important live stream we've had today with your friends. And Mariette, thank you once again for joining us. And we've had you on a couple of times on live streams, and it's always a very, very important and under discussed topic when it comes to drinking water. And people need to understand that without drinking water, you can't survive.
That is correct. I fully agree with that. It's a basic human right and a necessity.
Yeah. Alrighty. Take care, Marietta, and
Thank you very
thank you once again for joining us.
Yes, I've tried to look at the chats, but I don't see any chats.
You'll have to. I'll send you the link to the YouTube link, which will have the entire chat on. Give it about half an hour to process, because if you go straight on now, you won't see chat. But in about half an
Yes,
hour's time, you'll see all the chat, and you can see our discussion and what people are saying in the side chat.
because I would love to also respond to certain of the. I don't think all the comments would necessarily be positive, so I would like also to respond to perhaps some of the negative comments.
Right. Fiona Tim said there's also a lot of arsenic in beer, which we didn't talk about arsenic, but it's the same situation as cyanide, I take it.
Correct. Yeah, arsenic is a medical, but she is quite correct. The tailings and also the mine water contains elevated levels of arsenic.
Right. Okay, guys, take care, and we'll hopefully see Marietta again in the future. And if anything big and significant happens, please contact Marlena, and we'll have you on to discuss what that is.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you for yourself, for Marlena, and also for the listeners.
Okay, take care. Bye for now.
Bye.
Okay, guys, there you go. We just heard from Mariette about the situation with the water. I will change the image at the front of this live stream. I actually got the wrong set of questions, which is why we had such an informal discussion. But I think we covered most of the issues that were related to the mining area. And my big question on my lips is, why are people like the Oppenheimers not doing more to fix up the mess that they created historically? Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. I'll leave the side chat open for a few minutes so you can say your goodbyes, and hope to see you tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, when we talk to our next guest. Bye for now.